I think that it should go down to states themselves to govern themselves. And as a matter of fact, the government system in the United States was built in such a way as to be a republic, right? So the way you described it is perfect, like these almost individual countries in a union. Like what they meant when they said union, they didn't mean what we have today, where it's really a federal government really running everything. They meant this is our thing, right? We're all individual sovereign states, but this is our thing. So I do think the states have the right and responsibility just to say, this is what we're going to do. And I do believe, Jamali, I think that if you, in the United States of America today, I think if you said, put it to a vote, let's let each state vote, I think that you would see abortion banned in virtually every state, except for the known liberal ones, yes.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
Are you quite libertarian in your political approach?
Very.
Yeah?
I think that if you took like the law of God and you applied the general equity of it to today and said, let's make our system look like what this is, it would look very libertarian. Yeah. It would look very libertarian. So yeah. But I think
isn't part of like libertarianism as well, like freedom of choice?
In a sense, except libertarianism, this is where libertarianism dies. Well, libertarianism dies because it's got the right ideal of personal freedom and personal responsibility and self-governance, right, and small limited government. That kind of stuff is like, in principle, it's absolutely right. I think that comes ultimately from Christian worldview to have that kind of idea. However, where libertarianism dies, and it will never get off the ground, is it doesn't have an objective moral standard. Because you can say personal freedom and responsibility all you want, but if you don't have an objective standard of what is actually right and wrong, you're just in a sea of confusion. Yeah. And so I think that's where libertarianism will always just fall dead. So
do you think that, because I'm assuming that, correct me if I'm wrong, you want to see America's law based on a Christian system of law and justice, of what you perceive to be law and justice, right?
Yeah.
If I'm a non-Christian, do you think I should have to live under the guidelines of a Christian morality if I don't believe in it?
Well, it's a good question, and I think that if we were to ask it the other way, same assumptions, we would see that we're talking about the same thing. So, for example, I know that you're not a believer, not a Christian, but you would probably want more of a secular society, right? Democracy. That would be.
I prefer democracy to a theological law and justice system. Yeah.
Right, but the thing I would point to is that every system is a theocracy. Every system is a theocracy. So, for example,
we took elements of it.
Yeah,
because obviously, ideas of Christianity, Islam, whatever, just from years and years of, and they were like the powerhouses politically for so many years. Yeah, and they're going to have certain parts of their theology or their philosophical thought that we're going to take, like, don't kill people. Yeah, we'll have that.
We'll take that. Yeah.
Don't steal. Yeah, we'll have a bit of that
love
too.
That, yes.
You know what I'm saying? So, we are going to take certain elements of that because there is.
You can't live without it.
Yeah, there is a certain moral standard that I think even an atheist and a Christian would share. I think if you get two decent people who are Christian and one's an atheist, and you say, "What do you think about murder?" or "What do you think about a robbery?" We'll probably both agree we don't like it, right? But it's it's the other things, because there's other nuances. Right. I think that people will disagree on.
Of course.
Probably wouldn't want to live under.
So what's interesting is that the way that you illustrated that is actually really interesting. You talked about Christians and atheists, and even atheists borrowing, saying, I like that from the Christian worldview. We'll keep that. We'll agree on that. What I would point to is that the atheist is being inconsistent at that point, because he has to borrow capital from the Christian worldview in order to live in a just society, an ordered world. But the atheist is living inconsistently with his own principles. So, for example, when the atheist says, I think it's absolutely wrong in society to murder and to rape, what I would say is that comports with Christianity.
But so are we going along the perspective here that Christianity own morality then?
That Christianity can justify moral appeals, objective moral appeals.
But then it sounds like that we're saying that Christianity is the arbiter of morality.
Well, I'll say it this way, give you something to shoot at.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would say is that the Christian says, say, rape and murder are absolutely wrong. And the Christian has a basis to say that. We believe that we're in the image of God. God has spoken on rape and murder. He condemns it. He calls it, he calls it what it is, and he says you're not to do it. That's a certain claim from God. Now, so when I say as a Christian, you're not to rape and to murder, I have a worldview that makes sense of that. But let's take, for example, the atheist. The atheist says, I believe that it's wrong to rape and murder as well. Yeah. I can ask the atheist, well, how do you justify that claim? Because you believe you live in a universe that's time and chance acting on matter, that your ancestors were fish, and that there is no objective morality. You see, so the atheist has to borrow from the Christian worldview to make sense of his own.
But if we go to countries where they don't have Christianity, like, they're not all raping and murdering each other. Do you know what I mean? Though it's like there is some inbuilt morality
because they're in the image of God. We're all in the image of the same God.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is so the Christian and the atheist, if we're just going along that perspective, you say that that one can justify the claim and one can't.
That's right.
Is what I'm saying to you is that you're not born with the innate idea saying like if it wasn't written in your text that you would commit the crime because you had no more back into it. Just what I'm saying, because there's other countries where if we go to like the middle of
Papua New Guinea,
and they've never heard of Christianity,
they never heard of Jesus.
They're not raping and murdering each other because
they do. They do rape and murder.
I'm sure there is.
And so the question is
a percentage.
The question is, and here's the rub.
It's not enough to then say that it's not. I don't think it's enough of a percentage to then say, oh, it's because
here's the rub though.
That they do it.
Those pagans, polytheists in Papua New Guinea, they can't justify
and stuff.
They can't justify the condemnation of rape and murder that takes place in their society. Because they're in the image of God and we're all in the image of the same God, we all know God in our heart of hearts and we all have his law written within us. This is why atheists and Christians can look across the aisle and say that rape was wrong. But only the Christian has a worldview that can make sense of what they're saying. The atheist can say that's absolutely wrong. And then if you really ask them, was it really absolutely wrong? They'll say, well, no, not absolutely wrong. It's all subjective. There's no absolute moral oughts. I'll give you Dawkins' statement. Dawkins in his book, River Out of Eden, says Richard Dawkins.
The atheist,
he says that in River Out of Eden, he said that there's ultimately cosmic indifference. He says there is no good, there is no evil. There's no good, there is no evil. Now, that's him being a consistent atheist at the moment, but he won't live that way. Because in order to live and breathe and move in this world, he has to borrow from God, borrow capital from the Christian worldview in order to make sense of his world. He'll say there's no absolute morals, but then he'll live in such a way as there actually are. So he'll live like a Christian, like an image bearer of God, but he'll deny it with his profession of atheism. So what's interesting here in terms of like someone says, really? You want a society where people all love Jesus and they all they all believe that loving God and loving neighbor are the most important thing? You want a society that actually points to God's laws of standards of justice? I would say absolutely, but so does the atheist. The atheist also wants his ultimate. So for example, let's ask it the other way. You asked a moment ago about, you really want people to, like me as a secularist, not like to live in a Christian society? I would say, well, I'm now a Christian living in a secular society. And it's being demanded of me that I follow secular law and Demas. I follow Demas's rule as the ultimate. And Demas right now says that it's perfectly acceptable to murder your child in the womb.
Which may be the case, but also if we're talking about just democracy, do you appreciate that even though it's the point I made before, no one's telling you have to have an abortion, and you know what I'm saying? But then on the flip side is you are allowed legally to go protest it. So there has to be some appreciation.
Thanks to the Christian worldview.
If we look at religious dictatorships ever, or religious countries ever, democracy does. Christians
have failed in history.
Yeah, but it fades away. We have to kind of look at that.
But we can. We can. You're right, Jamal. And I'm going to say this: it's important for any Christian to not skirt the issue. If we ever see failures from Christians in history, it's important for me not to whitewash that.
Yeah.
But watch this. I can, as a Christian, look at the failures of Christians in history, and I can point to how I know they were wrong, because they said one thing with their mouth about what they believed, but they contradicted it with what they did. In other words, they weren't living according to the thing they said they were standing on. So that's important. I can point to that. But, and this is important too, and this is not just a flippant thing, and you said something too. I watched one of your episodes. It was hilarious. Who were you talking to? Some dude you were talking to, and he was throwing out all these like statistics and all these things. And you said in your comedy bit afterwards, you're like, don't you hate when you talk to people and they throw out like stuff at you, and you're like, I need to learn more, because they're just throwing stuff out, and I have no idea if it's true, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was it was insightful, and it was good. But truly, look this up, and I can even get you resources. All these things that you and I take for granted today in our cultures: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom against warrantless searches and seizures, all this stuff, the right to remain silent. Truly, truly, Jamali, that is stuff that didn't come to the world through the atheistic or secularistic worldview. It came to the world through the Christian worldview. There's an objective basis for those things. So yes, when I stand out of an abortion mill and I get to preach the gospel and call out to women to help them, that's a benefit of the Christian worldview. Atheistic regimes in history didn't give people freedom of speech. They don't. Atheistic regimes in history don't give people the gift of freedom from warrantless searches and seizures. It is explicitly the law of God that gives you those things, and we're all the beneficiaries of it. So thank God for Christianity, even though it's waning today in our culture and society today. So you and I both, we live as beneficiaries of the work of Christians before us. Now, don't get me wrong, Jamali. I would never want to say that there was some utopia behind us. There was hard stuff, there was failings, there was suffering, there were screw-ups, there was sin. But truly, what we have today before us in terms of blessings and goodness has come from the biblical worldview.
Yeah. Do you also accept that it comes from other religious texts as well? I mean, sort of like the ideas of, Islam and stuff like that, and Judaism and all these other religious texts, and sort of, Greek, in democracy and stuff like that. All these other political worldviews have come from other things, not just Christianity.
So yeah, in terms of, so say for example, if I was to address the issue of Islam, Islam is interesting because Islam comes after the time of Christ, and the scriptures have already been given to us.
Muhammad was the last prophet.
Muhammad, and Muhammad lived around Jewish and Christian tribes, so he heard their stories and he interacted with them. And what Muhammad did is he borrowed stuff from the Bible, and then he ended up changing the message and distorting the message. And so, there's a lot of commonality in terms of things you'll see in Islam that are common with Christianity, and that would be because ultimately of borrowing. And in terms of someone says, what about Judaism? I would say, well, I believe that Christianity is true Jewishness. It's true because it's following the Jewish Messiah. I have the Torah and the Tanakh. I accept every word of the Old Testament, and I believe
the New Testament
is the fulfillment.
Yeah.
So of course, you'll see the parallels in many ways. I think a lot of times too, like Jamali, I don't have any question at all. If you and I went out to have dinner together, you and I would probably respond to an injustice that we saw the same way.
Yeah, similarly, yeah.
We would feel the same.
Of course, yeah.
And I believe that there's common ground between us because we're both made in the image of God, and you're going to see a lot of that. And, dude, you were born and raised in London?
Yeah, East London, yeah.
You're also the recipient of a culture that was given to you by the biblical worldview in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, well,
you can't shake your Christianity loose.
Both sides of it. I come from with this episode, I'm trying hard to skirt away from race, but I'm half Jamaican, and we didn't have a good side of Christianity. We're still feeling that today,
Yeah.
So so to say I've had the good influence of Christianity, and I think there are certain laws and certain things that come from the Bible. And I think it's ridiculous to say that he didn't,
Yeah.
But I've also seen the bad side of it. I've seen the side
Truly.
of that endorsed slaving my ancestors.
Truly.
I've seen the side that sort of gave him this sort of hard laden Christianity.
Right.
That still affects my country today.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
exactly.
So, I've seen both sides of this perspective.
True. There are people in history that we could both rightly condemn that professed love for Jesus and abused other human beings. But just take this as a thought experiment. As a Christian, I get to condemn those Christians in history for what they did because I have an objective basis. And I say, what you're saying is inconsistent with what you're doing. You said you stand on the scriptures, but you abuse these people. That violates God's commandments. But watch this. If you don't have Jesus, Jamali, and I mean this with respect and complete respect, if you don't have Jesus and a biblical worldview, you don't have any real basis to complain about what anybody did to your ancestors, which I think is abhorrent.
Yeah.
I think it's evil and wicked and unjust what happened, but I get to complain as a Christian. But if you don't have Jesus, how do you complain? If your ancestors were fish?
Well, you kind of,